Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies coming at you with another tips and tricks video. We are at the very beginning of January. That means that a lot of us are still crawling our way through our piles of toys and hobby miniatures that we got over the Christmas period. And I don't know about you, but I certainly like to receive Forgeworld as presents over the Christmas period, and I did not get disappointed this year. So whilst I was putting together some of my new kits, I thought, what better time than right now to show you guys how I put together Forgeworld miniatures, show you the pros and cons, the do's and do nots of that process. So stick around, guys, and enjoy the video. Okay, so this is the model I'm going to be showing you guys how to build today using my tips and tricks for Forgeworld. It is a Macarius Vulcan. All Forgeworld kits will basically come like this. It will be large block pieces of resin. As you can see, the majority of the hull is one solid lump of resin with these huge big gates at the front. That's where the resin was poured in by. So you're left with these huge big things sticking off the fronts. These are very much not as easy to get rid of as things you'll find on plastic kits. So it is handy to know what to look out for and how to deal with them. Step one with all Forgeworld kits is to lay out all the parts and then go to the little pamphlet you get with the miniature and check off all the parts and make sure that you have them all. Remember that these miniatures are hand bagged, hand packed. They're not done by machines like all the plastic kits are. So that means they are slightly more prone to there being mistakes. So just go through and make sure you have all the parts. Then these are the tools that I recommend you have for constructing miniatures. So a nice sharp scalpel is tool number one. A set of files, quite fine. You don't want to be taking off large chunks of resin just to get rid of mold lines and any slippages that happen. A hobby saw is something you will not really have come across unless you're a big converter before. You can buy them in most hobby shops. This is actually one that Games Workshop used to sell themselves, but you can buy them most model shops for a couple of euro. They are super important for building Forgeworld models. Two clippers. Now the reason I say two clippers is the one in my left hand with the black handle are my good clippers. I want to keep them good, and I don't want to be cutting off any large chunks of resin with them and damaging them, bending them, or dulling them. So I have an older pair of clippers for those parts. And then this old wire brush, which used to be an old Citadel tool, it's actually a resin brush. It's designed to clean off dust and extra bits off of resin. They don't sell anymore, so if you don't have one, just get a toothbrush with stiff bristles, and it'll do just a good job. Okay, first part is cleaning off all the excess bits of sprue and the gates. That's what the large chunk of resin stuck at the back is. They're called gates. And as you can see, there's no way this thing is snapping off by itself. There's no way your scalpel or your clippers are going to go through it. And this is where the hobby saw comes in. So you're going to take your time. And with any good saw, all the same rules apply. Get a good angle. Make sure you're cutting away from your body, away from your fingers, your hand. And also think about the cut where it's going to go through. You don't want to damage any of the model while you're doing this. You don't accidentally get the wrong angle and cut into the piece. So I always kind of go a couple of mils and then I'll pick up the piece, turn it and see where I'm cutting. See if the angle is good. If I'm good, then I'm going to follow through on that line and cut off the gate. As you can see, the hobby saws cut through resin like absolute butter. So although these things seem super intimidating, they are not that bad. And they're only on the really large pieces of resin. Once I get to nearly done, I just snap off the last bit. Remove this gate. Some people save these for building terrain and stuff. I just get rid of them because I don't think anyone actually goes back and builds them. It just takes up space and clutters drawers. We'll come to cleaning up the rest of that piece that we just cut off in a moment. But I'm just going to talk very quickly about that dust that is all over my workstation now. That's the dreaded resin dust that everyone tells you to be super careful about. So if you are doing any cutting or filing with Forgeworld, I recommend you wear a mask because this stuff here is carcinogenic. It's the kind of stuff you do not want to get into your lungs. It can cause all sorts of inflammation and do bad things. So make sure you wear a mask when you're cutting or filing or sawing or filing. Snipping off or removing a bit of extra flash isn't going to do that same thing. It's only when that dust appears. Okay, now we're going to remove the rest of that piece of resin. For that, we are going to bring on those nasty old clippers, get them in and cut those parts off. Now, Forgeworld kits are better designed than you think. All of these, like obviously that join now, the bit that we're working on, that we're trying to clean up, it obviously looks like a mess. There's an extra bit of sprue sticking out. The lines are all rough. And the idea of getting this thing completely smooth so you will not notice that there was a big gate there is a super daunting and terrifying prospect. But you got to remember that you don't have to clean that thing up to perfection. Usually the miniatures are and the gates are in places that when the model is fully built, you won't see those parts. I still remember the day building my Warhound Titan, and I cleaned off the gates that go on kind of the back of his shoulder. And this is for huge pieces of resin, so the gates were huge. I sawed them off, I filed, I cut, I sanded until it was completely smooth, and then realized that vents go over those back bits and cover up it all, so I didn't need to do that at all. It's the same with this. That looks quite rough. You'd be tempted to spend a lot more time trying to smooth it out, but if you look at it, it's in between the track assembly. So once I add the track in, it covers up the bad bit. So you don't need to spend a million years cleaning and filing it to perfection. Just do a bit of dry fitting with some of the parts and see if anything is going to cover those parts up before you spend an extra hour on something that is going to add absolutely nothing to the model. Okay, when cutting off other resin parts, resin is obviously quite a soft thing. So if I had taken this clippers now, lined it up with a plastic kit, I would have just cut here like this. With the resin kit, because it's so soft, you risk damaging the actual piece. So even with little bits like this, I recommend jumping over to the hobby saw. Don't worry, this is just so I can show you the angle. And then literally cut off that gate. Then you're left with this piece, which you can then go in with a knife, and then you can clean it up properly without risking ruining that angle or doing any damage to that pipework. Like I said, just come in with a knife, clean off the excess resin, and then round off the ends. Some resin parts will be filled in during the kind of pouring process. If you see any really thin, flat pieces of resin, they're not supposed to be there. So I'm just going to push my knife through this and cut it out, the back square bit in there. It may seem hard to know what parts are supposed to be cut out like this. If you go back to that first picture where they showed off all the parts, you can see the hole that was supposed to be there and stuff like that. So once you have all the parts cut out, all the gates removed, all the sanding done, it's time to wash the models. This is just a basin of water with a bit of dish soap in it. Now, if you're wondering why you need to wash miniatures, there's a thing called a release agent. So this is what is added to the molds before the resin is poured in, to help these things break out of the molds easily without damaging any parts. This residue is like a non-stick piece, so its purpose is to, like I said, slide the parts out of the resin molds. But this release agent is an absolute nightmare when it comes to painting. If you do not scrub the leftover residue off, you will spray the model and you will go through the painting process. And as you're painting, you will be scraping off and removing large sections of paint off the model. It has happened to me before. It is absolutely heartbreaking. So, basin of water, soapy water, leave the bits soaking for 10-15 minutes. Then take out the bits, jump over to that stiff bristled toothbrush, give it a scrub, all of it, make sure you don't miss any parts, rinse it off again, drop it on a towel, continue to the next part. It's very simple, just scrub the release agent off. After all these parts are then washed and left to dry, once you're then holding the parts when they're dry, basically run your fingers over them. They should feel super smooth and super dry to the touch. If you can feel any slickness on any of the parts, that means there's still some release agent on the parts, and I'm sorry to say it's going to go back in the basin and get another wash. It seems tedious, but I promise you'll thank me in the end. Okay, now we're on to another thing of water. This water is boiling water, which is another thing you need to be super careful of. Don't scald yourself, don't burn yourself, be really careful. So resin is obviously a soft material. It can be subject to bending or warping in the cooling process of it being made, or just being in its box, being transported around or stored on shelves or whatever. It can be problematic. So the solution to this is boiling water. So as you can see, these two parts don't fit together at all. They are supposed to, but they don't. But once you push a piece into boiling water and leave it for 30 seconds to a minute, 30 seconds if it's a thin part. If it's a big chunky part like this, maybe a full minute. Use something to help it come out of the kit. After that, it's malleable. The parts will actually bend and move. Therefore, you can press the two parts that weren't fitting together before into each other and basically press them and hold them firm for 10 seconds. Once the resin cools down again, it once again hardens up completely, but it hardens up as a solid fit. Those two parts fit. The most notable use for hot water is for barrels and stuff that tend to get warped and bent. Put them in hot water for 2 seconds, take them out, straighten out the barrel. As soon as it cools, they are arrow straight, and it's exactly what you need. Here's another example of the front of the tank where it doesn't look that good. Where those two parts connect, there's a little bit of a gap. That's okay because the model comes with a bumper. I know it's not technically a bumper, but you know the idea. And once that goes in place, it hides that seam between the two parts. It hides any of the bits where you cut off or filed or anything like that. And it leaves you with a much neater result. Here's me dry fitting parts. Once I find the parts fit together nicely, all I do is apply super glue. Unless you're building a Warlord Titan, all these people who say you need to pin everything are just crazy. Resin is a porous material. What that means is that the super glue will literally seep into the resin, giving you an incredibly strong hold on two parts. Like you saw how long it took me to put those parts together. Now I'm going to put this entire track assembly together. So all I'm using is gel super glue, no pins, no nothing. I'm going to put this side piece on. I'm going to hold it for 5 or 6 seconds. That's it. That's all it's going to take for the super glue to get in. Now that is completely stuck now. Like super sturdy, stuck, solid, together. So just continue that process and glue all the rest of the parts of the tank on. I've decided to leave the side sponson barrels and the barrel of the gun that's built into the hull off for easy painting. But other than that, there is a completed Macarius Vulcan tank. Built, hopefully properly. I hope you guys learned a little something about Forgeworld with that. Okay, there we have it, guys. Everything that I use to get my Forgeworld miniatures, from the piles of resin and plastic to the beautiful kit on the tabletop. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, make sure to give the video a like. If you think I've missed anything or you want to add anything to the video, put it in the comments below and I'll get back to each and every one of you guys. And if you want to support me and support this channel, the two best ways you can do this is, 1, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And 2, think about joining my Patreon. There's a bunch of new rewards up there of the new year, such as access to a private Discord server and now access to private videos. So we're going to be putting up 1 hobby video a week just for my Patreon subscribers. So stick around and enjoy those. Thank you guys so much for watching to the end of the video. I'll see you in the next one.